In my opinion, Resident Evil 4 is the pinnacle of enemy design for the Resident Evil series. So many memorable creature designs came out of this game and have become associated with the series to the point that they have trickled their way into the later games. So I figured that today it would be fun to count down a list of some of the most interesting foes to come out of Resident Evil 4 in my opinion. Keep in mind that this is my opinion, and as such will probably differ from yours, so feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. All that being said, let's kick this list off with I had a hard time narrowing down this list, and there were a few creatures that I could have placed in this 5th slot. However, when it really came down to it, I think that Lago has to be the one that I am the most interested in. Unlike the other contenders that I was going to place in this slot, such as the Gigante, Lago is an enemy that we only get the chance to encounter one time, in a lake that we have to cross in order to get the key for the church. And maybe it's these limited encounters that makes this creature more mysterious to me. All that we really know about this creature is that it lived in the lake and that it's a salamander who became host to Las Plagas. But even given this limited backstory, he still left quite a lasting impression on me. I think that one of the things that helps this creature stand out is just how interesting I find his build-up. I remember in my initial playthrough, seeing the one policeman being burned in the center of the village and wondering what became of the other. After a while, I kind of just forgot about him and assumed that we wouldn't get an answer. However, we did, and it was awesome. Getting a small glimpse of the creature as it devoured the second policeman was an intimidating thing, knowing that you'd be crossing the lake soon in a boat that could easily be swallowed whole. And all of this, not even to mention its little Easter egg, which is one of the best in the game. It's just a really interesting creature that I have fond memories of, and for that reason, Lago takes the 5th spot on this list. In any other game, I think that Gyaradors would have been my favorite creatures. I've always really liked the creatures' designs. Their eyes sewn shut and retractable claws that have been grafted onto their arms makes them stand out to me aesthetically. But in this game, there's just so much competition, so unfortunately I had to place them this low on the list. One of the most memorable things about the Gyaradors is of course their inability to see you. And while it should have been pretty obvious to me when I first played this game, given the cutscene where you can clearly see that their eyes have been shown shut, for some reason I just didn't get it. I remember the Gyarador in the prison absolutely destroying me on my first playthrough because he was so different to what I was used to doing so far in the game. Up to this point in the game, running to put distance between yourself and the enemy is really the only recourse to fight them. But the Gyarador completely flips that on its head and punishes what you've learned to do up to that point. It's really the only enemy in the game that forces you to take an approach of slow playing the situation so as not to call attention to yourself, and it's genius. Not to mention, once you're further along and have to mix playing it slow because a Gyarador is in the room and taking out Ganados that are attacking, it just creates some very tense encounters with these creatures that I really remember fondly. So for that reason, the Gyarador takes this spot on the list. To be honest with you, I don't really understand you three. We aren't really given any information about him. Sadler just kind of brings him up on a whim, and 5 seconds later, you're fighting him. He's just a really weird encounter that I don't think anyone saw coming. But despite that, or maybe because of that, he's one of the most interesting creatures that I remember from this game. U3 is the culmination of research with human, insect, and reptile DNA, all held together with the Las Plagas parasite. And beyond that, we don't really know anything about this thing. I've even heard people speculate that this is Torres Mendez reanimated with the power of the parasite. And while I don't know that I believe that theory, because there's no evidence for it, outside of the fact that they're both bald, it just proves that there is a clamoring for more information about this thing, and I'm hoping we get it in the remake. As for the actual boss fight with this creature, I like it. It's very claustrophobic at first, giving you the shipping containers that you need to escape. And then, when you finally manage to escape, the real fight begins. However, the lack of any real backstory for this creature, and the fact that the build-up for him is pretty non-existent, means that I can't really put him any higher on this list. This is another creature that I'm hoping to learn more about in the remake, and if dreams come true, maybe we'll even get to see some other creatures from the U line make an appearance. The Regenerators are probably the most memorable things to come out of the 4th Resident Evil game. Their design isn't really overly unique. They're just humanoid gray creatures with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Not exactly the most complex design for creatures by any stretch. However, what they lack in design distinction, they more than make up for in their abilities, and really in their audio design. I don't think there's any other creature out there that I can just think of its sound off the top of my head, but the breathing of the Regenerators has just stuck with me for whatever reason. Their belabored breathing is one of the creepiest sound effects in the game, and probably in the entire series, and that's before we even get to their abilities. As their name would suggest, Regenerators are able to regenerate their body, and it's one of the most interesting and fun ideas that I've ever encountered in a video game. This was the first time that I ever shot the head off of an enemy and had that head regrow as the creature continued to chase me like nothing was wrong. And the way that you have to kill them with the thermal scanner to see where their plagas are located in their bodies is just ingenious. The only downside to this creature is that, once you know their secrets, they don't really pose that much of a threat to you. However, they are still one of the most memorable and creepy enemies in the game, and for that reason, they earn the 2nd spot on this list. I'm sure I've come up against what are essentially unkillable enemies in games before, but I cannot think of one that is done as well as Salazar's right hand, Verdugo. The setup for this encounter is absolutely amazing. You've seen Salazar's right hand hanging around Salazar, and you've probably thought that you were going to have to fight him at some point. So when Salazar sends him after you, it's not really a surprise. However, as you make your way through the sewer tunnels, the game shows you what the creature is seeing as it hunts you down. It's really freaky the first time you play through it. As you approach the room you need to go to turn the elevator back on, he'll attack you from the ceilings and the floors, but not in a way where you have the chance to counterattack. And once you finally manage to get the power for the elevator back on, Verdugo will make his descent to your level, where the battle will begin. The build-up is excellent, but the boss battle is just as good. Verdugo is essentially unkillable without preparation, which you will almost certainly not have your first time around. If you're like me, up to this point, you've probably killed everything that you've seen, so you'd assume that Verdugo would be no exception. However, he is insanely quick and virtually impervious to bullets. He can be frozen, but even when you manage to do that, he can take serious punishment without dying. I don't think I killed this creature until my 3rd or 4th playthrough of the game, once I had enough money to buy the infinite rocket launcher. He's just a very intimidating boss that I will always have fond memories of. And for that reason, Verdugo earns the #1 spot on my list of enemies in Resident Evil 4. Anyways, that's my list. Let me know yours in the comments down below. I'd also like to say that I didn't consider people like Salazar or Mendez because I see them more as characters rather than creatures, so they aren't really comparable to the others that are on this list. Like I said, I think this game has one of the most robust lineups of enemies out of any Resident Evil game, and could really make a run at some of the most memorable enemies in a game ever, at least for me. That all being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.